Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us, and it's always an honor to work with, we have Neil Levin. He is the Senior Nutrition Education Manager for Now Foods, but also is a certified clinical nutritionist and has much expertise and knowledge to share with us tonight on nutrition to support women's life stages. Thank you so much, Neil.
A pleasure to be with you again.
Always.
And these are some of my credentials, and I have a couple pictures there that one of them is from me in 1973,
Wow.
working in a food co-op in Urbana, Illinois. And then you see me 51 years later, still doing it. So, Karen, you were talking about being old. Guess that makes me old, but you can see I have credentials with nutrition groups, etc. But we're going to be talking about women's wellness tonight. And the main point here is we always hear that a healthy diet is going to be something that is all that we need. We hear that a lot from dietitians and doctors, that all you need is good food. But there are other problems, lifestyle choices, demands, health conditions, genetic factors. People may need extra nutrients or special nutrients at different stages of life, and dietary supplements play a role along with diet in helping adapt nutrition. So what's considered the main women's life stages are adolescence, young adulthood, childbearing years, menopause, postmenopause, and maturity. So looking at these one by one, during puberty and menses, adolescent females will need zinc for hormonal balance as well as the immune system. They need calcium, vitamins A and D, and other nutrients for the skeletal and bone health. And there's a lot of weight concerns, a lot of poor diets where supplements will help bridge those gaps. And one thing to mention here is that anyone on a restricted diet is going to need to look at their nutrients and what they're restricting with the restricted diet. I've been a vegetarian since a year before that picture I showed you. And so I was immediately looking for vitamin B12 and then protein and then omega-3 and then zinc and then iron. And the list goes on and on. People on restrictive diets are restricting nutrients. The keto diets are losing a lot of plant-based nutrients. They're, the gluten-free diets, they're losing essential nutrients in grains unless they use alternative grains. There's a whole raft of things, vitamin E, plant sterols that are used for lipid balance, all those things that are in these nutrients. Fiber is sometimes missing in some diets. So especially with young girls, you see a lot of restricted diets, and then how are they bridging those gaps? Young adulthood, you have emotional and mental development. The brain actually isn't mature till about age 25, by the way. So you still need all the nutrients for brain growth and development, at least through that period. Folic acid, also known as folate, is essential during childbearing years. DHA, one of the omega-3 fatty acids, is important for cognitive development. Again, the brain is going to develop at least to age 25, and DHA is very important. Childbearing years, hormonal balance becomes critical. You need iodine for the thyroid hormone production, but it does many other things. There are iodine receptors in the sex organs, for example, the ovaries, etc. Folic acid and iron to support childbearing, omega-3s for mood support and immune response. And again, DHA becomes even more important during conception and pregnancy. And if women are young enough, where they're still developing and they're getting pregnant, their DHA might be robbed from their body to give to the baby, and their brain might not continue developing as it should up to age 25. And then there's menopause. The growth and development theoretically are complete. Hormonal balance starts changing typically in the mid 40s, but there's a wide range there. The estrogen production declines. Phytoestrogens become important for hormonal balance. Soybeans and other legumes, flax, red clover. And if you're familiar with the blue zones on the planet where people live the longest and the healthiest, the one dietary thing that's common to all of them all over the world is the amount of beans and legumes that they consume. That is the one commonality in diet from all these places around the world. Skeletal growth will plateau at this age, and digestion will often become less effective, where women might be looking at enzymes, probiotics, fiber as possible solutions. Post-menopause, there's continuing changes to hormonal balance. Estrogen will decline even more. The phytoestrogens become even more important. It's been noted in the medical literature that in some areas of the Orient, women do not seem to experience menopause because of the abundance of legumes, including soybeans, in their diet. Aches and pains, cognitive support, bone retention issues, cardiovascular issues all become concerns as women age beyond that mature area. And then finally, when they're mature, balanced nutrition, focus on regular healthy meals. That's important because we see a lot of women as they're, especially if they're single or widowed, that they don't eat regular meals, they graze, and they might not be eating balanced diets. And with that, you have, again, gaps in the nutrition, especially when they need certain things a little more than normal at this age. They need protein to maintain their muscles and neurotransmitters, enzymes, hormones, you name it. Vitamin D compensates for reduced sun exposure. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Let's focus in on nutrients for bone health specifically first. Now, the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations has an approved health claim from the FDA. These are rare. The FDA usually has to be sued to approve these because they don't like to approve dietary things as being something that you can make claims on labels. So it's something that's against their nature. They really don't like it. There's only a handful of these. And one of them is adequate calcium and vitamin D throughout life as part of a well-balanced diet may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. And the next few slides are based on this statement by the FDA that they actually approved. They have another class of health claims that they allow, but you have to put disclaimers on them. This one has no disclaimers. The evidence is very clear. Now, one reason why this is important is the pH, or the acid-base relationship, is very important to bone health. The body has to keep the pH balance within very strict limits. And the way it's measured is to look at the pH of the bloodstream. There is a way to test that externally, where you test the urine with a pH strip. Now, the best way to do that is collect the urine for 24 hours and check the pH, which is something they might do in a nursing or hospital situation. But you can test the first morning pH if you're sleeping for at least 7 or 8 hours and not urinating, and collect that urine. It'll be fairly close to the 24-hour one overnight. So, and the ideal is to be at 7.0 or slightly above, to be neutral. If what you eat generates acidity, your body has to neutralize the blood to keep the pH balance where it needs to be. Now, this is very misleading, because if what you eat is acidic is not really the right way to say this. This is Osteoporosis Canada, the official Canadian organization that says this. But they're really talking about the effect on the body if it has an acidic effect on the body, the generating acidity. Because if you eat a lemon or a lime, it is acidic, but it does not generate acidity in the body. And I'll go into that a little bit for you. Now, what happens to the extra acid in the body? How does the body deal with that? It uses calcium. That calcium is typically going to come out of people's bones. So it's released to neutralize excess acidity. It often is not enough where you still have an overly acidic bloodstream while you're still robbing the calcium out of the bones. That is a typical scenario when this is happening. So a high acid forming diet is the way I would say this, can lead to bone loss over time. Now, Dr. Russell Jaffe, MD, PhD, formerly with the National Institutes of Health, he's one of my teachers on this area. And I've been studying with him since 1991. So we have a long relationship. Acid alkaline foods. The foods on the left are alkaline forming in the body. The foods on the right are acid forming in the body. So you can see the typical American diet with meat and eggs and grains tends to be very acid forming. When you're looking at produce, fruits, vegetables, legumes, spices, herbs, seasonings, seeds and nuts, those tend to be more alkaline forming. And some of the alkaline forming compounds are actually acids. That's what makes this so weird. So to be healthy, when you are healthy, 60% of the diet should be the alkaline forming foods and no more than 40% the acid forming foods. When you're not healthy, you want the alkaline forming foods to be at least 80% of the diet. And you probably can't read this, but this is something you can get online, the Alkaline Way Guide by the Health Studies Collegium. I also have it posted on my blog at honestnutrition.com with Dr. Jaffe's permission. But the things on the far left are the most alkaline forming. The things on the far right are the most acid forming in the middle. So when I'm looking at this, we're looking at lime, raspberries, watermelon, pineapple being the most alkaline forming. We're looking at oranges being slightly alkaline, lemons a little more alkaline, grape, lime a little more. What's the difference? The amount of citric acid. The more citric acid in these, the more tart they are, the more they provoke the alkaline compounds in the body that make the bloodstream alkaline or more neutral. Looking at a lot of the oils, pumpkin seed oil is alkaline, avocado oil alkaline, but we're looking at walnut oil. A lot of the common oils we see are all on the acidic side. A lot of the processed cheeses, the table salt is acidic. Sea salt is very alkaline because of the other minerals in there, mineral compounds. So again, when you're looking at this, you can get a good idea. Should I shift from these choices of legumes and to these, which are more alkaline? Lentils the most alkaline, soybeans are the most acidic. So it makes a difference, the balance in the diet. So this is a very useful thing if you can access this and want to look at the details. Now, this is a study I found about 20 years ago almost, and it lists the functional doses known to be good for bone health. And when I collected them here, it's basically a multivitamin. These are very close to the RDAs of the nutrients. The exceptions are vitamin C is higher. Protein is a standard measurement. Potassium is a standard measurement. You're not going to get that in a multivitamin that level, but a lot of these are RDA levels, except for vitamin C. But you need all of these to build bone, not just calcium, vitamin D, etc. Let's zoom in a little more and look at calcium. Now, again, there's the FDA authorized health claim, adequate calcium and vitamin D throughout life as part of a well-balanced diet may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. The recommended calcium intake is 1,200 milligrams a day for women age 51 and older. Bone loss in premenopausal women between age 18 and 50 can be reduced significantly if supplementing with a gram a day, 1,000 milligrams a day of calcium. And, these are the reference I use for that. But in the 5 years immediately after menopause, calcium supplementation doesn't do much during that period because there's a rapid loss of estrogen. Estrogen is related to bone formation. So serum calcium levels will increase and intestinal absorption of calcium will decrease because of the lack of estrogen in the 5 years immediately after menopause. But after this period, supplementation has a significant benefit. For women who are postmenopausal not taking supplements, they lose about 2% of their bones a year. So 10 years, that's 20%, right? And we're talking women in their 50s, 60s. Now, if women will take 1,000 to 1,600 milligrams daily as various forms of calcium salts, combinations, it will decrease the rate by 0.25% to 1% annually. So 1% is about half of the loss you could cut if you're on that high end. The greatest reductions are in the first 1 to 2 years of supplementation. And after this period, the rates become closer to 0.25%. So that 1 to 2 years in the first of supplementation are the most important to maintain long term. But that was a first year effect that we were seeing. 30 years of continuous calcium supplementation after menopause could reduce the loss of bone density by 10%. The bone density will retain 10% more, in other words. And there could be percent reduction in fracture rates compared with women who take calcium supplements. And this includes the Cochrane database of systematic reviews, which is probably the most prestigious organization that is doing these reviews of the medical literature. But supplements must be continued indefinitely. The effects of 2 years of supplements on bone density could be lost within 2 years of discontinuing the supplements. And if you add vitamin D, it improves prevention of osteoporotic fractures in especially the elderly. So these are the official rates. Women over 50 should be getting at least 1,200 milligrams of calcium, maybe 1,600. And there are different forms of calcium. The pre-acidified forms are called chelates, and they're less alkaline and more dilute than crude forms such as carbonate. Carbonate is actually a strong antacid. If you look at Tums and the other antacids, they're using calcium carbonate. They are antacids. The chelated forms are pre-acidified, which makes a difference. They can be, if they're pre-acidified, they're pre-digested. You normally need to have good stomach acid and take these non-chelated forms like calcium carbonate with meals to be able to absorb them. And they have pretty good absorption if you have good stomach acid and take them with meals. And you basically are making these chelates in the stomach that way, if you can do it yourself. But a lot of people, they don't have good stomach acid, they take antacids, they have digestive issues. And if you have low stomach acid, your minerals, when they do like blood tests, are going to be down across the board. You're not going to absorb minerals very well. So the common chelates are the citrates, malates, amino acid chelates, gluconates, ascorbates. You can add glycinates to it, the amino acid glycine. But some of these forms that are acidified are well absorbed at any time. with food or immediately after eating for the carbonates and the these are two minerals together, carbon and calcium. This is a mineral and an acid, calcium and citric acid, calcium and lactic acid, calcium and gluconic acid. Uh, it's advised not to take more than 500 milligrams of calcium at one time. Uh, they separate the calcium out of the compound. So you might have 3,000 milligrams of calcium carbonate, maybe it's more like 1,200 milligrams, but it only contains maybe 500 milligrams of actual calcium. So the calcium is always going to be called out on the label. Now there is an unusual form of calcium I like to formulate with. It's called Aquamin red mineral algae. It's calcified seaweed that's harvested off the coast of Iceland and is processed in Southern Ireland. It contains calcium, magnesium, and 72 trace minerals. And the trace minerals give a big boost to the action. The other thing is it's a plant source. And when you look at it under a microscope, you see a honeycomb structure as opposed to a rock powder. And that porous structure gives it much better absorption than a rock powder calcium carbonate, even though it's still a calcium carbonate. So it aids the mineralization and maturization of bone cells and healthy bone density. And they actually did a study where they compared it to glucosamine and other things, placebo, for walking distance for people who have trouble walking. And guess who could walk the farthest? People who are taking this form of calcium. So I actually use this in formulating the calcium in our multivitamins. We have a standalone calcium D with it. We use it in some of our joint health products like the UC2 as a filler because it's a nice synergistic filler. That's the product we have. This is the one that my wife and my daughter take too. Just to give you a testimonial there. It's a plant source. It's a food source, not a rock. And it's not been processed in any way. Now, the Lewin Group does reports to Congress on Medicare and things like that. And they say there's a lot of evidence supporting the association of 1,200 milligrams of calcium with vitamin D that's associated with reduced bone loss and fewer hip fractures. And that reduces the cost of hospitalization for hip repair, reduces the skilled nursing and physician costs. And in some cases, it actually preserves the independence of elderly people who might otherwise break their hip and end up in a nursing home for life. The other component we were just talking about is vitamin D. Vitamin D is from certain foods. You can make it in your skin from sunlight under certain circumstances, not always, but it's typically in eggs, cheese, fish where you're eating the livers, some mushrooms if they're grown in sunlight or UV rays, ultraviolet rays, and of course fortified foods. But there aren't a lot of foods containing vitamin D naturally. Wild-caught salmon has maybe 5 times as much as farm-raised salmon, for example. And this is a unique vitamin because you can use ultraviolet B rays from the sunlight and convert cholesterol to a form of vitamin D that converts to the form that's actually has manipulation to make the active forms in the body. But the longer the distance from the equator, the darker the skin pigment is, the seasons, the avoidance of the sun, and scar tissue all can negatively affect the ability to make vitamin D. I do trainings in the Middle East regularly. I was just there in December. And people in the Persian Gulf area, they're 85 to 90% deficient in vitamin D because they don't go out into the intense sun, either because it's hot Most of the year it gets to be like 130 degrees or more. And yeah, I only go in the winter when it's more like 70 or 80. But the other thing is they wear a lot of clothes, so they're covered up. And there's studies showing that people in Spain or Florida get less vitamin D and sunlight than people from Canada because they don't go out in the sun without sunscreen and covering up. This is an interesting thing. It's the Sunshine Calendar from the Vitamin D Council. And when you're looking where you are in the country here, you could see that in the winter, January, February, November, December, you can't make any vitamin D. The sun is too low in the sky. And how do you know when it's too low in the sky? It's the shadow rule. When your shadow is longer than how tall you are, you cannot make vitamin D. The sun's too low in the sky and it's filtered too much through the atmosphere for the UV rays to be strong enough to make vitamin D. So where I am in Chicago, which is pretty similar to the Seattle area, the Tacoma area, in terms of where it is from the equator, uh, between late March and late September is the only time I can make vitamin D outside, and only when the sun is high enough and when the air is clear enough. So between late September and late March, I can't make vitamin D. People can go out and sunbathe stark naked on Christmas Day, New Year's Day. No vitamin D. Zero. We're too far north. And vitamin D helps with calcium and phosphate homeostasis and bone mineralization, as well as a raft of other benefits. Now, there's a large study in postmenopausal women aged 50 to 79. They took 1,000 milligram of calcium plus 400 vitamin D daily for 7 years. It only modestly improved their bone mineral density. But if women were at least 80% adherent, if they took this at least 80% of the days, the combination significantly reduced the risk of hip fractures by about 29%. And the RDA now went up from 400 to 600. And the calcium went up from 1,000 to I think it's 1,300 now. So that's a conservative amount. At least 800 a day. International units of D is recommended in dark-skinned or veiled institutions, elderly people, and institutionalized people. Higher doses for fat malabsorption, obesity, or things that enhance vitamin D breakdown. And it doesn't make a difference for D2 or D3 at physiological levels. Uh, they they're equivalent based on their ability to cure rickets, and most steps in metabolism of both forms are identical. Dr. Michael Hollick, one of the world authorities on vitamin D use, published many, many articles. Actually has patient records for 7 years where they took either 1,000 D2 or 1,000 D3, and all their chemistry is identical. It doesn't really matter unless you're talking about giving 50,000 or 100,000. There's a difference in the high dosing, but not in the normal dosing. So this is from the National Institutes of Health, by the way. This vitamin K is something that's gotten a lot of interest in recent years. And in fact, vitamin K2 is regularly one of our top 10 selling items. And we have about 1,500 items, so that's pretty high up. It's needed for calcium absorption and transport, bone matrix, tooth health, cardiovascular health. And with high dose vitamin K supplementation in postmenopausal women, higher doses may be required for optimal bone health. It can increase bone mineral density, and vitamins K and D work synergistically on bone density. Now, the RDA is typically 80 micrograms a day, Recently, though, the FDA decided that the daily value, the number that goes on food and supplement labels, will no longer include all forms, only K1. So K2, which used to be clustered with it on product labels, is now way down at the bottom, separate because it no longer has a daily value, which is the FDA's interpretation of the RDA. 90% of dietary vitamin K is K1, 10% is K2, which is typically a form called MK4. And K2 is found in fermented foods. And we don't eat a lot of fermented foods. That's why the percentage skews heavily toward K1. K1 is necessary for clotting. K2 is necessary for moving calcium out of the bloodstream into bones and other tissues. So it does have a role, but because it's not essential for clotting, the FDA and the Institute of Medicine haven't decided K2 is essential. They're both in the food supply. There's also an unusual form of vitamin K2 called MK7 versus MK4, the common form. It increases levels of MK4 and it helps with arterial health by keep taking calcium out of the arteries, but also protects the bone density by moving it to the bones. Now, when we're looking at the different bioavailability on these different forms of vitamin K, the area under the curve is what we're looking at. And K1 is the area in red, this little area right here. It doesn't absorb very well and it doesn't last very long. MK4, the green one, is even smaller. MK7, the black one, has a much broader area under the curve. That is the difference in bioavailability between these forms. MK7 absorbs by far the most, and it has the much longer half-life, as you can see here. And it works by slowly converting to MK4, which is the active form of K2 in the body. So MK7 is what I take separately to help keep my arteries clear and help with my bone density. There are, of course, other bone nutrients, as we discussed. Vitamin B12 seems to have an important role in increasing osteoblasts, which is the cells that are building bones. If there's a deficiency of B12 and folic acid, two B vitamins, it increases homocysteine levels. And that interferes with the strength of collagen in the body. Everyone's heard of collagen recently. It's hot, hot, hot. But if you're going to make collagen in the body, and then it has to be cross-linked, it has to be reinforced. And if you're deficient in B12 or folic acid, homocysteine might interfere with that and make the bones and arteries more fragile. So homocysteine is a bad thing. It's supposed to be an intermediate, and it's not supposed to stick around in a metabolic pathway. So they looked at stroke patients 65 years and older in a double-blind randomized controlled trial. And if they were given folate and B12 to reduce homocysteine, after 2 years, the homocysteine levels decreased by 38% in the treatment group, but increased by 31% in the placebo group. So that homocysteine is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease as well as bone density problems. Now, soy isoflavones are selective estrogen receptor modulators. That means they will fit estrogen receptors, but they will not overwhelm you with estrogen. They're about 1,000 times weaker than the estrogen we make in our bodies. So they satisfy the body thinking there's enough estrogen, but they don't flood the body with estrogen. And they block the bad estrogens like the pesticides that would otherwise hit the receptors. So blocking them is a good thing too. Soy isoflavones reduce bone resorption, the breakdown of bone tissue. They stimulate the osteoblast activity to promote more bone growth, and they increase levels of bone alkaline phosphatase, an enzyme that's a marker of bone formation. Soy protein typically is isoflavone rich, as well as whole soybeans. And of course, we have a soy isoflavone product. I recommend 1 to 3 a day of this for people who don't want to eat soybeans for digestive reasons or allergy reasons, but they're willing to take the isolated isoflavones. Now, there's a section here on the fats and oils people need too. Omega-3 fats, you probably heard of. That's the stuff in fish oil, but as well as other some plant foods. You have to get it from food or supplements. You cannot create this in your body. There are fats we can make in our body, like oleic acid, for example, omega-9. The form of omega-3 in plants is called ALA. It is poorly converted to EPA and DHA. When I've looked at studies, and ALA converts to EPA between 5 and 15%. And let me put that in practical terms for you. If you want to get 1,000 milligrams of EPA, which is the low end of the therapeutic range, you could take 2 fish oil capsules of the strong fish oils. If you want to get it from flax oil, which is one of the strongest, almost 50% ALA, how many of these capsules do you have to take? You know, those big fish oil capsule type things? Well, it's, let's say, an average of 10% conversion. So you need to take 10 times as much. So to get 1 gram of EPA, you need 10 grams of ALA. Well, flax is only about 50% ALA. You need 20 of those big capsules versus 2 fish oil capsules to get the same amount of EPA or DHA. Now, there are some algae oil ones. They're very expensive. I take them myself because I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat fish, but it's a limited alternative. It's not what most people are taking. By the way, supplements are safer than fish. The mercury in fish bonds to the protein, not the oil. And the metals are typically very low as well. Now, there are typically 3 forms of fish oil on the market. The natural one is the triglyceride form. There's a reconverted triglyceride form, which are the concentrated ones. They have been converted to ethyl ester form and then reconverted to the triglyceride forms. So the reconverted triglyceride forms are the most processed. They're the farthest from the natural fish oil. But they are often just labeled as triglyceride form, and you don't know they're reconverted. They have benefits based on the amount of EPA and DHA in them. Enteric coating does not improve absorption either. It just stops them from being able to be burped up as much for the population where that's a problem. And bioavailability is also influenced by fat composition of a meal. To absorb fat, you need about a teaspoon of fats to absorb fat-soluble nutrients. So if you're taking 1 capsule, there's not going to be a teaspoon in there. You would need several capsules for that. Probably about 7 or 8 grams, about 7 or 8 of those big capsules would be about a teaspoon. And that would be enough to self-absorb the amount of oil. If you just take a capsule, it's not enough. You need another source of oil with it. Yeah, it won't trigger the pancreatic enzymes and the bile you need to absorb that. But which form you buy, a question of how long it takes to absorb, it's not a primary consideration. Any of these forms, they'll work equally. They just take different lengths of time to digest and get in the system. Only free fatty acids absorb, not these form triglyceride or ethyl ester. Those are stripped off during digestion. And that's the difference, how long it takes to do that. And we see that young women have greater improvements in episodic memory if they supplement DHA. And consumption of these omega-3s, particularly DHA, enhances cognitive performance, learning, cognitive development, memory, speed of cognitive facts. Malnourished and older adults with age-related cognitive decline or mild cognitive impairment. There's also women's multivitamins. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just to give you an idea, We do have products like Eve. I designed these myself. They're designed for women. We have 3 different formulas, tablet, capsule, and soft gel. The soft gel is the best of these 3. The veg caps are iron free, so they have different amounts of iron. This is the tablet, and that's recommended 2 a day. These are the V caps, which are iron free, and that's recommended at 4 a day. And we've got the soft gels recommended at 3 a day. The advantage with the soft gels is I was able to put in things like evening primrose oil, uh, healthy oil. There's flax oil in there as well. The vitamin A and E are a little stronger. Since it's an oil base, I can do that. Now, vitamin A is also needed for bones. There's receptors for retinoic acid, vitamin A, on the cells that make and break down vitamin A, and it has a role in regulating that. If there's a deficiency in animals, the bone thickness gets greater, but it becomes more brittle. It's not as strong. Then there's the B complex vitamins, which you can get as part of a multivitamin or in the diet. B1 intake is lower in hip fracture patients compared with age-matched counterparts. B2 is associated with bone health. B3 is associated to the bone mass in premenopausal women. B6 deficiency in performance. Our bodies need this to make DNA and genetic material. We need it for cell division. It's especially needed for pregnancy, 800 micrograms daily. That's from the National Institutes of Health. However, the dietary supplement is more effective in preventing birth defects than the form in foods. Public health authorities recommend women consume folic acid from fortified foods or dietary supplements or both to reduce the risk of birth defects and other forms of folate, including the diet, doing that. So the public health authorities say you need to supplement folic acid to do this. Now, food folates are mostly methylfolates, but they are digested to folic acid and are reconverted in the body to the methylfolate is also used to detoxify homocysteine. So to get rid of homocysteine and lower that, folate is one of the things you need. That as a vegetarian, I need to supplement, but it's found in animal foods. We cannot synthesize it in the body. It's only synthesized by bacteria, frankly. Microbes produce all the B12, and we get it by eating the microbes or food the microbes have gone into, such as meat. There's 2 forms needed by the body. A lot of companies are putting out methylcobalamin as the only form. That's a third of the B12 in the body. Most of it is the non-methylated form, adenosylcobalamin or dibencoxide, which is the energetic form. Methylcobalamin is the form that will reduce homocysteine and help with bone health, detoxification, etc. They have totally separate pathways in the body. There's 15 to 20% of the population, heavier in the elderly, who are B12 deficient. Not only vegetarians, but pregnant women, people with hemorrhages, kidney, liver problems, anemia, etc., can be deficient. You only absorb up to 3 micrograms from your food. The rest absorbs at about 1%. So it's a passive diffusion. So if you took 1,000, you'll absorb what's 1%, about 10. and you might get another 3. Maybe you'll get 13 micrograms. If you take 10,000, you'll get 100 plus the 3. But in clinical trials, this is the Cochrane database, which is very authoritative. Consumption of effective as the intramuscular injections in the medical protocols. Vitamin C is necessary to make collagen and to cross-link it. And it stimulates the formation of bones. So vitamin C is very important in this whole thing. Not just bones, but arteries. Boron is a mineral you get about 3 milligrams in an apple, for example, mineralization. And it increases levels of estrogen type compounds and calcium absorption in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. So sometimes you'll see boron in some of these formulas, or you could buy it separately. Copper has a role in there. Copper deficiency reduces bone strength. Copper supplementation for 2 years reduced bone loss in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. And magnesium could reduce postmenopausal bone loss and bone turnover as well. So a healthy diet. Manganese, something people don't think about a lot, but along with copper, calcium, and zinc, menopausal women over a 2-year period. As I mentioned earlier, all these nutrients that are in a multivitamin combine to help with bone density. Potassium too, higher intakes of potassium, magnesium, higher total bone mass in healthy women 45 to 55 years old. And zinc, we need it for osteoblasts, the cells making bone tissue, collagen production, and alkaline phosphatase, which is an enzyme related to bone strength. Let's look at the monthly cycles as a separate area here now. We have a formula called Female Balance. It has standardized wild yam, vitex, and dong quai. It has GLA, a fatty acid, plus folic acid and B6. This is intended to help before the beginning of a menstrual cycle, not to take it during menstruation, though. So we combined herbal ingredients. We have the wild yam, dong quai, the vitex or chase tree berries. We have borage oil powder with some B6 and folic acid as well. And dong quai is often used for symptoms of PMS. It's not used for menopause so much, more for premenopause. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's used in combinations for abnormal menstruation, suppressed menstrual flow, dysmenorrhea, and uterine bleeding, but not hot flashes. That's why we combine these things. Vitex is from a berry, chase tree berry, and it can support healthy endocrine function and is standardized to a compound called agnosides. So the symptoms of PMS that we're looking at are irritability, mood, anger, headaches, breast fullness, bloating, water retention, swelling, and looking for a mild analgesic effect. The trace tree berry extract is available by itself as well. It's a fairly popular one to take. Again, material. And looking at PMS specifically, there's a link between low calcium intake and symptoms of PMS. Supplementing and getting 1,000 to 1,336 milligrams daily, that's an odd number, significantly reduces depressed mood, water retention, and pain associated with PMS in women with inadequate daily calcium intake. And taking calcium carbonate 1,200 milligrams daily, that should be with a meal, seems to decrease PMS symptom scores by about 18% compared to placebo. That's from the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Taking magnesium orally seems to relieve symptoms of PMS. Supplementation can improve symptoms, those mood changes and fluid retention in some. A combination of 200 milligrams of magnesium and 50 milligrams of B6 seems to reduce premenstrual symptoms such as nervous tension, mood swings, irritability versus placebo. Flax seeds. I had flax in my smoothie this morning. Taking flaxseed powder, 25 milligrams daily, which I estimate is about 4 tablespoons, for 2 months, reduced breast pain intensity by about 72% and duration of pain by 60% compared to baseline in healthy women with cyclic mastalgia compared to placebo. So that's a huge decline. And you just mix it in your food, make smoothies, etc. And GLA, one of the omega-6 fats that's very healthy in evening primrose oil, can help reduce breast tenderness, according to Dr. Andrew Weil. And then we'll look at menopause and beyond. Natural progesterone. We offer 2 different progesterone formulas, unscented and lavender. It's derived from wild yam. Wild yam is not something you can make progesterone from in the body. It has to be produced in a laboratory. And that's actually where the original birth control pills came from. Pharmaceutical company G.D. Searle synthesized this in 1960 or so. And that's the basis of the original birth control pill, is coming up with this form. So we're using the natural USP progesterone. We're not using synthetic progestin. And it's a liposomal cream in a metered pump container. We also have a menopause support formula that includes organic dong quai, red raspberry leaf, chase tree extract, red clover, black cohosh extract, soy isoflavones, wild yam, licorice, which is an adaptogen. It's a small amount. Ginger and 5-HTP, which is a form of hydroxytryptophan that is a precursor of serotonin and melatonin. This is actually a formula here. There's 5 reviews on our webpage from verified purchasers, and we only started collecting these reviews this year. The overall rating is a perfect score of 5. One called it a game changer that helped ease their symptoms. Another said it works great and their hot flashes went away within 2 weeks. Night sweats are much less frequent and it helps you sleep at night. Those are the only 2 reviews, but there were 5 perfect scores. And Panax ginseng. People think of that as being an herb for men. It can improve quality of life and menopausal symptoms such as fatigue, insomnia, depression in postmenopausal women, and improve some symptoms associated with menopause. And because it's an adaptogen, it's not just for men. Ginkgo biloba, taking 160 milligrams a day or 120 milligrams a day, depending on how they do it. Significant relief in breast tenderness and other symptoms associated with PMS. You started at the 16th day of the cycle and continue until the 5th day of the following cycle for up to 2 cycles. And urinary tract health is I think that's the last section I have here. Cranberries are a source of flavonoids and active compounds such as proanthocyanins. They help maintain a clean waste stream in the urinary tract. And that's what makes cranberries effective for cleaning and supporting the urinary tract. They're easily absorbed in the digestive tract, but they're excreted in the urine. What they're believed to do is to make the bladder more slippery so that bacteria cannot form colonies on it. It won't get rid of existing colonies, but it will prevent their spread or new ones from forming. So it's a way to help control the spread and growth of bacteria you don't want in there while you use other strategies to try to get rid of it. It kind of arrests the development. D-mannose is a simple sugar that occurs naturally in plants, including cranberries and blueberries. Small amounts are metabolized by the body, but most of it is excreted in urine, where it has similar properties to cranberry. Allows soluble waste products to be flushed out in the urine and doesn't interfere with healthy blood sugar because you don't burn a lot of it for energy. We have D-mannose caps. This is, again, one of our top 10 items, the D-mannose. We also have mannose cranberry combination, a dual action formula. And we sell mannose as a powder as well. Uh, and probiotics are part of urinary tract health. You think of it as being gut health, but it actually goes beyond that. How do you know which strains to buy? You have to have a strain that you know is safe, so it has to be genetically identified which strain you're getting. There are millions of strains of probiotics and other bacteria that aren't probiotics. It has to resist acid and bile. You should have one that you could, you drink kefir, you drink kombucha, uh, you eat foods like that, yogurt, and they are acid and bile resistant naturally. So they have to survive all the processing and sitting in a bottle to reach you and be able to have a decent cell count when you get it. And the strain has to have clinically proven health benefits. There has to be in vivo live studies and human clinical trials as evidence for what these are going to do. Now, the way we identify that is to use a device called a riboprinter. And for years now has been the only manufacturer with a riboprinter where we can identify the probiotics we're buying from the growers. Other people are taking the grower's word for it. And we have a product called Women's Probiotic. It uses 3 clinically tested probiotic strains supporting women's health through every stage of life. And it's got these 3 strains, the Bifidobacterium lactis HN019, the Lactobacillus acidophilus LA14, and the Lactobacillus rhamnosus HN001. Now, if you notice, each of these strains has a number or letters and numbers after the Latin name, and that's how you could tell which strain it is. If you go to PubMed online and type in Lactobacillus acidophilus LA14, you could see what studies it was used in because they're publicly available. So that's how you know you're getting a clinically proven strain. Now, not only reproductive, but the urogenital health, the urinary tract and the genital area of the woman is highly dependent on microbes. They enter, they colonize, or they transiently pass through the vagina. And indigenous microbiota, particularly lactobacilli, play a role in maintaining healthy vaginal status. And lactobacilli are major constituents of the normal flora, the normal bacteria in the vagina, in the urinary tract, especially Lactobacillus acidophilus. They protect against colonization by undesirable microbes by producing lactic acid and hydrogen peroxide at 3.8 to 4.5, so that yeast and other undesirable things can't grow there. Now, oral intake of these strains increases vaginal colonization in 7 days. You don't have to use it as a suppository. Taking it orally, it will migrate into the vaginal area in the urinary tract. Lactobacillus also improves calcium absorption by making a lowered pH because it's making lactic and acetic acids. So these so-called lactic acid bacteria, the probiotics, lower the pH in the correct area and help you absorb more calcium, which again helps buffer the bloodstream pH appropriately. And the Bifidobacterium lactis HN019, which is one of my favorite strains, I take it twice a day myself. On whole gut transit time and functional GI symptoms in adults. It can reduce transit time, the time between when you eat and you have a bowel movement, and can reduce the frequency of GI symptoms in adults. Reason I take this is I travel a lot and I need to really have a lot of protection down there. So we're using strains that have been shown to colonize the vaginal tract and maintain a healthy vaginal pH when taking orally, while reducing occasional gas and bloating and supporting immune system function in pregnant and nursing women. Supporting healthy immune markers in breast milk and influencing fetal immune parameters. And the last item I wanted to mention is candida. A lot of people are worried about candida. Pod arco, oregano oil, black walnut, and caprylic acid are in. And you have Candida albicans in the body. You want to offset it and control it into a normal amount. You don't want it to overgrow. And people with antibiotics will kill your bacteria, but not things like Candida. So it can overgrow and take an opportunistic approach to taking over where it doesn't belong. So Candida support does not clear Candida. It helps support a healthy balance of intestinal flora so it doesn't overgrow. And that's my last slide, and you made it through to the end. So happy to take any questions you have as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. What a wonderful presentation. Feel free
Thank you.
to ask questions in the chat box or unmute yourself. I learned so much, and you actually helped me um, kind kind of link up some things that I've been questioning myself. And I'm so excited to do those um, recommendations and see the changes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, appreciate you all joining us
Yeah,
tonight, and I guess some other folks will catch it when it's posted on the Facebook site. So
right. Thank you very much.
I
yeah,
did have one quick question, if I may.
sure.
In the women's multivitamin support, where you mentioned the different varieties, are all of those vegetarian?
In which part?
Sorry about my puppy. The soil of the women's
Yeah,
multivitamin.
that's bovine gelatin.
Okay.
So that one is vegetarian.
Okay.
Now the other ones, I believe one of them is vegan and has vitamin D2, and the other is vegetarian and has vitamin D3. And the soft gel will have the D3
Okay.
as
Thank
well.
you so much.
But if you're not concerned about which form of vitamin D, then because D3 is made from lanolin, typically from sheep's wool. So it's not harming the sheep at all to shear them and get the lanolin. But some vegans obviously wouldn't want to use that. But our soft gels in most cases are going to be bovine gelatin. We have a few specialized products like carotenoids where the soft gel would be a vegan one, but we have to outsource those. That's all intellectually property patent protected, and you have to hire someone to do it, and it costs a lot more because we can't do it ourselves.
That sounds great. Thank you so very much for answering my question.
Sure. Of course.
That's a good one. Yeah, what you were saying about
All
the
right.
calcium kind of had a light bulb go off in my head. I with one of my medications, I have to. Oh, sorry, there goes my dog. um,
Everybody's a critic.
right. I have to take extra calcium,
And I totally have not been taking the extra calcium, and I think it has been affecting my pain levels and then also my cycles. So mind blown. It makes all the sense in the world. So thank you, Neil.
Right. I hope it helps.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
thank you. Why don't you wrap up here, Elizabeth? And
for sure. Thank you everyone for watching and watching the replay.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for more wonderful classes from Neil. We have you next month. So very
amazing, huh?
excited.